All right, so we've talked about faith, we've talked about hope, and now we talk about love. And love is not the, hey, let's go to a men's conference and talk about love and loving other people. That's usually like a marriage conference, something like that. But it is one of the theological virtues that we need to consider, and I think we would do well as men to really go deep in understanding of love and what it means to really exemplify love, to have a heart of love for other people. And I'm going to tell you right up front that this is the one I maybe struggle with the most because I just don't like people a lot of times. Like, I used to pastor, but the problem with pastoring is that people are involved, right? If you just let me preach, I'm good, and then I get to sneak out the back and don't have to talk to anyone until next week, I'd be good. But I struggle with people. This is one of my struggles. Actually, when I was working at Camp Wow, I would hire the staff, and I'd go around to all these colleges, get these staff, and I thought I was just being great, like I was this good pastor to them. And I was going through my life with them and just thinking, we're getting the job. I was a pastor, but I also had to get all the jobs done. And I'd go and okay, let's clean up this. Let's pick up this dorm. Let's do this game. Let's get all this stuff. And I was very task-oriented, not people-oriented. And at one point, one of the staff members came over and was telling me, she said, you get your job done, but no one likes you. And I went, oh, really? I had no idea. I thought we were having fun. We got the job done, and then we played basketball, and that was great. And they're like, no, we're people, and we matter, and we want to be loved throughout the process, not just, get the job done and then go play basketball. And that was really a big gut check for me. And so this love idea has been a challenge and takes a lot for me to do. And so this will be self-confession as part of this. What I was really good at, and I think I'm still decent at, is just acknowledging people and then ignoring them the rest of the time. Right? I don't necessarily need to know your name. You can tell me, but I'm not going to remember it, and I'm not going to invest in the relationship. I'm just going to move on. And what I've found is, and especially through this passage that we'll see, that's not loving at all. Right? This whole concept that we say that you can love people, but you don't necessarily have to like a person, that has no biblical precedence, right? You can't love someone and not care for them. Right? If I'm going to love someone, then I need to forgive them. I need to be patient with them. I need to be kind to them. And so we can't get in this mentality of, oh yeah, I'm standing off to the side. I love you, but I never want to talk to you or look at you or have any kind of relationship with you. Right? That's deceiving ourselves. And so we need to develop this culture of love as men where we see the people around us and we value them and we invest in their lives. So we talked about faith, which is that vertical. We're looking at God and having faith in Him. We said hope is this kind of forward-looking to the future. Love is what's going on around us as we do this thing. Right? As we're moving forward in hope, knowing what the future is, we're loving the people around us. So it's more of the horizontal. And we know it's a critical part of who we're supposed to be, because Jesus, whenever He's asked what's the greatest commandment, He says, well, love God with all of your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love people as yourself. Right? So love is a critical element that we can't just look past. We need to cultivate this in our lives. We need to slow down and make sure that we are being loving, not just to our spouses, not just to our kids, but to the world around us. We need to demonstrate love. And so this is what Paul writes about this loving attitude, this virtue of love. Colossians 3:12. We're going to continue on. We're going to finish this book. We will not read all of chapter 4. We're just going to read chapter 3, but I'll kind of summarize the rest of chapter 4. So Colossians 3:12 says, therefore, as God's chosen ones, holy and dearly loved, put on compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another and forgiving one another if anyone has a grievance against another. Just as the Lord has forgiven you, so you are also to forgive. Above all, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity. And let the peace of Christ, to which you were also called in one body, rule your hearts. And be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell richly among you in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another through psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts, and whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. And then he goes on and he says, gives us instructions for our home and for our household relationships, and says wives are supposed to submit to their husbands in the Lord, and husbands are to love their wives. Children are to obey their parents, and parents are to love their children. Slaves are to obey their masters, and masters are to care for the needs of their slaves or their workers. Right? All of this is bound together in this idea of love, but I want to make sure that we deal with each one of these aspects of love as we go through the text. And so he begins there in verses 12 and 13 with these, what I would call sub-virtues. Or they're still virtues, they're just not one of the big ones, right? And they're subsumed under this idea of love. And look at the language that he uses for each of these. What's he talking about? To be compassionate, to be kind, to be humble, to be gentle, to be patient. All of those are relating to the world around us. You see, what we're called to do is, if we're really looking at that future hope, and we're going through this life with the future perspective of what God has called us to do, we have to consider the other people around us and be in right relationship with them. Not just the ones who are nice to us, but the world around us, and particularly the church and our family, but also those we encounter in every aspect of our life. We need to be characterized by love. And this is how he describes that characterization. He says to be compassionate, to be kind, to be humble, to be gentle. All of these are directed toward other people, and all of these are challenging for us because people are stupid. Right? People are hard to be around. They're annoying, they're obnoxious. And he recognizes that, right? He says to put off the old way of life. The old way was greedy and selfish and angry. And put on the new way of life, and this new way is kind and gentle and caring and compassionate. And I wonder if those words would be descriptive of how you conduct yourself. In this room, surely those would be indicative of who you are. But what about outside of this room when you go home tonight? Are you kind and compassionate to your parents and your brother and sister? Are you kind and compassionate to your spouse, to your kids? What about tomorrow, whenever that contractor comes in and hasn't done his job? Are you kind and loving and compassionate? You say, well, I've got to get the job done. I don't care about those people. That's not what the Scripture's calling us. It's not saying to be kind to those who fulfill whatever they need to in life, who have done good to you, who have done their part of the bargain. No, this is saying every person, no matter what they look like, no matter how they act, no matter how they've treated you, you are supposed to be kind and compassionate and gentle and humble. We are called to a life of love. And if we don't go throughout, if you go tomorrow and you say, everything that Micah said was great when we're at church, but I'm in the real world, then you're missing the point. What he's calling us to is to love the unlovable, to care for those who have done us harm, to do it even when it's difficult, even when we know that we could get our way if we were a little rough or aggressive with a person. Even when someone fails us time and again, or even when they get on our last nerve. For me, I know what's going to happen with me. When I get done here, I'm going to go to my parents' house and pick up my son, who's 11 years old. He's not here today, and it's a good reason. He'd be all over the place, and he'd be a little bit crazy. He is an incredible boy I love dearly, but man, he annoys me to no end. Right? I have a 15-year-old son who's an introvert. He's more my speed. Like, I wouldn't know that he existed on some days because he's so quiet and just goes through life. There's no high, there's no low. He's just here, no matter what. We joke that we don't even want to get him birthday or Christmas gifts because he's just going to say, thanks. And it means a lot to him, but he just doesn't show emotion. He's easy. I don't get on to him very often. He's just here. My 11-year-old, nope. Took every bit of emotion, every bit of energy, every bit of everything that you could get from that one son and shoved it into the other one. So when I get home after a long day at work, he comes, and as soon as I'm at home, it's like he's hitting me, he's touching me, he's saying things, he's asking me questions. I'm like, oh my goodness, can I go to the restroom? And that's my excuse. I'm going to the restroom, shut the door just so I can have some peace and quiet. And then I get out and I'm like, you're there still. You're like waiting at the door. Right? And I go and sit down at dinner and I try and have a normal conversation, and it's not normal at all. We try and watch a movie, and we're sitting there watching a movie, and he's just asking questions, talking the whole time. I'm like, just shut it for a minute, right? Pay attention. I haven't watched the movie either. How am I supposed to know the answer to that question? Or his latest thing is that we're in a movie and he gets exciting and he'll just clap. And I'm old. I don't want clapping to happen whenever I'm not expecting it. That's him. He's awesome, but he's grating. Right? He's a struggle for me. At times. Other times, I want to get him gifts because he jumps up and down and gets excited about it. But I found myself challenged, right? When life is tough, when I'm getting home late from work, when I have another thing I have to get to, and I just want to relax, and I have this kid talking to me and saying, let's go outside and play football. Let's do this. Let's do that. He needs love. Those characteristics, I'm called to have those with him, even if he's my child, even if I have charge over him, right? He has to obey me, but I still need to love him. I still need to be kind. I still need to be compassionate. I still need to be caring. Why? Because he is an image bearer. This goes back to what we talked about in the last lesson. All people are made in the image of God, and because of that, they all have equal value. Our value is not based on what we bring to the table. There's two different ways of describing value in philosophy. One of these is what's called instrumental value. Instrumental value is something that is valuable because of what it does for us. You're sitting in a chair. It has instrumental value because it holds you up. But the chair itself isn't valuable. It's just valuable because it does something for you. Intrinsic value is something that is valuable in and of itself, despite what it does for you. Humans have intrinsic value. You're not valuable to me because of what you can bring for me, what benefit you can bring in my life. You're not valuable to me because you can get me ahead in the next job or the next car or financial situation. You're not valuable because of that. You're not valuable because you work for me. You're valuable because God declared you valuable, and I need to see you in light of how God has made you. That changes our perspective on the world. That's what helps us understand what true love is that if we see everyone as God sees them, then it changes how we treat that person. It doesn't matter if they're low on the totem pole. They matter to God, so they should matter to you. It doesn't matter if they've wronged you, if they've mistreated you, they've been your enemy for years. They matter to God, so they should matter to you. Look at the language that he used to describe this afterwards. He says, humble, gentle, bearing with one another. That's my struggle right there with my son, to bear with him. And then notice what he says, and forgiving one another if he has a grievance against someone. I'm supposed to forgive someone who has done me wrong. Okay, I can get a hold of that, a slight thing. You've done something wrong to me. You ate the last chip. I wanted that. I'll forgive you. Right? That's pretty minor. We can do that. But that's not what Paul's getting at. If you continue on in this, he says, that just as the Lord has forgiven you, so you are also to forgive. He says, in the way that God forgives, that's the way you're supposed to forgive. How has God forgiven us? He's forgiven us not in small things. You took the last chip. He forgave us when we took his very life. Right? We haven't done small things against God. We've done monumental things against God. We have rejected him to the core. Humanity as a whole and us individually, we have rejected God wholesale. And yet, he chose to forgive us. And now we are called to forgive other people in that same way. This is incredible, right? You can think about, who do you have odd against right now? Who do you think, I don't like that person, they've wronged me. I haven't spoken to them in years because of what they did to me. Are you forgiving in the way that Christ forgave you? Are you willing to forgive and look past the wrongs of other people and to love them? Not just tolerate them, but love them. This is why Jesus, he gave the parable of this forgiving servant, right? If you recall it, it's in Matthew 18, right? When a king has someone or a ruler, and he has a servant who owes him a large sum of money, lifetime of wages. And that servant comes and says, please forgive me, please, please. I don't have the money. Please don't put me in jail. I can't pay this, but please forgive me. And the ruler says, okay, you're forgiven. And then that servant goes and he has someone else who owes him a very small amount of money. And that other servant goes to the one who he owes just a small figure to, and he says, will you forgive me? And that other servant says, no, throw you into prison until you pay every last cent. Right? That servant, the one he owed a huge amount to the king, to the ruler, and yet he was forgiven, but he was unwilling to forget this small thing for a fellow servant. And Jesus uses this illustration, this parable, to teach a great lesson in forgiveness. And he says, God has forgiven you a lifetime of sin, a lifetime of rejection, a lifetime of hostility toward him. Who are you not to forgive your neighbor? Who are you to treat someone as less than? Who are you to say they're not worthy of my forgiveness? It's too great a pain that they have caused me. It's too great an affliction that they have done to me. You don't understand the betrayal. Who are we to say that when we've betrayed Christ in such a more profound way? Our lives, if they're really going to be focused on the hope before us, we have to recall what God has done for us. We have to live in light of that. And so we need to see people as God sees them and to demonstrate a life of love that has compassion and kindness, humility and gentleness and patience. And then in verse 14, he says, but above all, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity. Love here is this binding virtue which unifies and motivates all of others. Right? We are forgiving, we are compassionate, we are gentle because we love. And so we need to put on love. He uses this language that it binds them all together. Right? It's like this, we're putting on all these different pieces and love surrounds them all and holds them steadfast and makes it possible for us to live them out. We need to cultivate that spirit and that heart of love, that virtue of love. Where we see people as God sees them, we value them not because of what they can do for us, but because of who they are in God's eyes. And we have true compassion and care for their souls. That we see every person as a child of God or potential child of His, and we love them despite all their blemishes, despite all their flaws. This love that he talks about, though, is this word that we talk about in sermons all the time, right? The agape love. This agape love is a love that's not motivated by emotions. You've heard this probably in multiple marriage or wedding ceremonies. This agape love is tied to a choice that we have. Emotional love is what someone does for us, the feeling they give to us. Even brotherly love is a love that we have out of obligation. Agape love is a love that we choose. It's a love rooted in this desire to care for someone, to say they matter and I want to care for them. I want to extend my emotional care for them and their life and what's good for them. Not based on what they've done for me, but based on who they are in God's eyes. It's not motivated by feelings, reciprocity, or benefit. And instead, it's centered in our understanding as image bearers and that all people matter. And when we do this, if you continue on in this passage, he says, if love binds us all, if love is surrounding us, then the peace of God will reign. It will rule in your hearts. Then you'll no longer be in factions. You'll no longer have this friction because everyone will be out for the good of one another. There will be peace. I don't know about you, but we don't live in peace right now, right? Amongst other people. Like we backbite, we hate people, we treat people in various ways, especially right now, right? Leading up to November, right? There's not a lot of peace going on. The reason there's not peace is because there's not love. Right? You can oppose me in your views and I can still love you as a person. You can go against everything I stand for and I can still love you. And out of that love, we can have unity, we can have peace. We may argue, we may fight, we may disagree, but we can still love. And it should change the way we disagree. It should change the way we interact with one another and with people who don't look like us or act like us. The world doesn't have a way to demonstrate peace. They don't have a way to really be loving. Love is our way of showing the world that we're different than them, that we have something that they don't. Why would we ever want to look like the world? Why would we ever stoop to that level where we thought we had to treat people like the world treats people? We've got to be better than that. We've got to cultivate love. We've got to start looking at the table around us. We've got to start looking at the people that we encounter in our day-to-day lives. Brad told the story of how some woman sitting on him in the Carl's Jr. line, giving him $1 biscuits and gravy. He's got to look at her with love, but not that kind of love, right? She's winking at him. We've got to look at people that we encounter, right? In the drive-thru, in line behind us, on the school bus, or next to us in the classroom. We've got to start looking at them through the lens of love and seeing that they matter, and out of that then will come the spirit of peace. Because we have a common mission, we have a common call. In the church, this is especially true. Ephesians tells us that there's one body, one spirit, one hope, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one. In the church, this should be primary. We're called to one mission, one purpose, and so we should be loving people as we're on that mission. And as we do that, it should be a display to the world of the difference that Christ makes in people's lives. Think about the examples in this household code that he provides after this. Right, he starts off in at the end of chapter 3. Wives, submit to your husbands. And we have to mention that at a men's conference, right? Wives, submit to your husbands. But why does he say that? Why would wives want to submit to their husbands? Because the husband is loving the wife as she should be loved. It's easy to submit when someone's on your side and is doing what is best for you and is loving you well. Children, they're submitting because they know. I mean, it's God ordained this order, right? There's this order to it. But in the midst of it, it's not a difficult thing. Slaves and masters, or workers, employers, employees, what if we want to translate that into today's culture, right? We can live well in these situations in life in which there's a power dynamic. We can live well in those situations if we're both loving each other as God has loved his church. Right? It's easy for me to submit to authority when I know that authority loves me as a person. So the question is, are you loving people the way they're supposed to be loved? Are you loving in such a way that it's easy for someone to want to follow you? Are you loving in such a way that people on the outside say that there's something different? Are you treating people, are they see in you that you have this heart for the nations, the heart for people, and that you're not satisfied unless you're loving others? I told you that this is difficult for me because this is not in my nature. This is not normal for me. I don't want to go and have a conversation with someone. I don't want to start a new relationship with someone because that's a challenge. Right? And because of that, I excuse myself and say, well, I'm okay. I don't have to, I can be loving, but I don't have to necessarily care for you. No, that's an excuse. He's not saying love people if it's in your personality and comes really easy. Saying love people despite the difficulty, despite the wrong that they have done you. Love them. Work on loving them. That's going to look different in each one of your lives. For some of you, it's going to be forgiving another person. And you need reminding of what Christ did for you so that you can do that towards someone else. For some of you, it needs reminding that you need to see people as image bearers and that they're not less than you. And so you need to treat them with honor and respect. For others, you're like me, and you just need to see that people need loved and need cared for and matter even if you don't know them. And that you need reminded that it's not an excuse for you to sit at home and be by yourself. People need you and you need people. That's what it is to be loving. It's to recognize the needs of others and to meet those needs. We've got to cultivate this love. We've got to cultivate the type of love that's listed in 1 Corinthians 13. And so here's what I want to do for you as we finish up talking about love. Because we're under the deadline that Daxton has set on me, we're going to wrap it up pretty soon. Have a little bit more? Okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks for your permission for that. You want me to go 20 minutes longer? You want me to go 20 minutes longer? Okay, you're so spiritual. Yeah. Here's what I wanted to do. I wanted to end this night as we're talking about love by reading the love chapter. As a reminder of what it means to live in faith to God with a hopeful perspective on the future and in right, loving relationship to others. My prayer through this is not that you'll just say, oh, hey, those are good reminders. My hope in this is that you'll invest into each one of these elements, faith, hope, and love, and that you'll work to cultivate that in your life. Right? These don't come natural to any of us. We actually have to put work into them. We have to go, and if I'm going to have faith in God, I need to be reminded of who God is. If I'm going to live with hope, I need to look forward at what God has in store and look at my life in relationship to that. I need to do some self-analysis and to say, I need to get rid of these characteristics. If I'm going to be loving, I need to look at the people around me and say, what does it mean to love that person? What does it mean to love that person? What does it mean to love that person? Right? There's work to be done, and hopefully through this, you're pushed and you're encouraged to cultivate those virtues with the goal that we walk in a manner worthy of the gospel, that we're men of excellence, that we're virtuous men. So here's what I want to do. You can read along with me if you want, but I would ask you, if you don't have your Bible open or you don't want to read along, just that you close your eyes, because I'm going to go into prayer after this. But I want you to think about the words that I say. As Paul writes and encourages the Corinthian believers to live in unity with one another, even though they may not all act alike, even though they may not always get along, how they can live in unity. He says this: if I speak human or angelic tongues but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so that I can move mountains, but I do not have love, I am nothing. And if I give away all my possessions, and if I give over my body in order to boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. It is not boastful, is not arrogant, is not rude, is not self-seeking, is not irritable, and does not keep a record of wrongs. Love finds no joy in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when the perfect comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put aside childish things. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I will know fully, as I am fully known. Now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. God, I pray that we would be men of love. That, God, we would see people as you see them. That we'd see them as valuable and worthy of love and respect and honor. And that, God, when they offend us, when they hurt us, when they annoy us, I pray that we would be patient, that we would be kind, that we would be gentle. I pray that we would treat them as people that matter. God, I pray if there is anyone here today that is in a broken relationship with someone, that there's unforgiveness that is there, I pray that you build this sense of love, this virtue of love in their heart to where they're unsatisfied with a broken relationship and that they do their part in offering forgiveness. Because, God, we know that you forgave us. Even though we're sinful people who have betrayed you, who have harmed you, who have done you wrong, who have spoken ill of you, you forgave us. So I pray that we would forgive others. God, let us go above and beyond what the world's expectations are for relationships. And let us truly care and forgive and invest in other people. God, I pray that we would be men of excellence, that we would cultivate in our hearts and our lives faith, hope, and love. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.